good evening to you all. You can tell that Canberra's winter is very definitely on the way, so thank you for braving the cold to come out for the launch of our Australia's Cyber Security Strategy, Execution and Evolution book, which I hope you picked up. We had them delivered fresh from the printers about 3 hours ago, and they said don't open them because the glue's not yet completely dry. So I think they're okay to be open now. And so the order of proceedings this evening is that we're going to hear briefly from the Minister assisting the PM for Cyber Security, Tehan, and then we're going to hear from Brodtman, the Shadow Assistant Minister for Cyber Security and Defence. Thank you very much, the both of you, for coming along. I'm going to claim this as an Australian first, that we have the Minister and the Shadow speaking on the same podium together. Not a cage battle, not a grudge match. But it does make me think when we get to the next election campaign, perhaps we should be having the great cyber debate in the course of that. We used to have the great defence debate before the 2013 election campaign, so I see a marketing opportunity here. And then after we've heard from Dan and Gay, we're going to move into a moderated discussion that our new recruit in the Cyber Centre, Fergus Hanson, will run, and that will include Zoe Hawkins, one of the authors of the report. And I should also acknowledge that I'm losing Zoe Hawkins and Liam Neville today because the new ambassador for Cyber Affairs persists in hiring my staff. But I do want to welcome Fergus and also Tom Uren, who's arrived on secondment from the Defence Department for a 12-month period. I just hope that the Ambassador for Cyber Affairs doesn't propose to hire those two, at least not for a little while. And so it just remains for me to say that you would know the government launched its cyber strategy about 13 months ago, and then just a few weeks ago it launched its report card of the first 12 months of implementation of the cyber policy. And there's been some significant successes which are acknowledged in our report, but there have also been areas that we call into question, or at least highlight where further work needs to be done. And clearly, I think Dan and Gay would acknowledge that cyber is a work in progress. It's something that we're going to have to constantly be changing our settings as we move on, because the nature of the field is so fluid and volatile, I think, is probably the right way to describe it. Anyway, let's get on with this evening's proceedings. And first up to give us a few opening remarks is the Minister, Tehan. Please welcome Dan.
Thanks, Peter, and can I just start by first of all acknowledging ASPI and the great work that they do under your leadership. You make a difference to debate on national security here in Australia, and it's fantastic that we've got such an organisation, and fantastic that we've got someone heading it of your calibre, so it's terrific to be here with you. Can I say hello to my good friend Gay? Gay, it's terrific to be here to have this debate discussion. I'm sure it'll be done with smiles on faces and in a nice friendly way. I had the great pleasure of going with Gay to South Korea a few months ago, where we took 8 Korean veterans. It'll be the last time we'll take a mission of its type to South Korea, and we had a terrific time. The veterans, who we called the Magnificent Eight, were remarkable Australians, and when we got back we agreed to invite them to the Parliament so we could recognise them in the Parliament and recognise all the South Korean veterans, because when they returned home, not like what happened in Vietnam, where there was obviously the Australian community was very divided with what happened there. the South Korean veterans really felt like that no one knew that they'd been there and done what they did. So we invited them onto the floor of the Parliament and thanked them, and it's one of the most special things I've done, and it was wonderful to do it with you, Gay. So it's great to see you here. It's terrific to see Alistair McGibbon here, the Prime Minister's Special Advisor for Cyber. Alistair, well done for everything that you've done in the last 13 months as well. You've been at the forefront of implementing the strategy, so it's terrific to see you here, and to everyone else who's come along tonight. Thanks for the interest that you show in this area, because it is an incredibly important issue for our nation. Can I say at the start that I welcome what ASPI have done in terms of producing a report on where we're at 1 year on, and also producing a scorecard. As members of Parliament, it is absolutely vital that we get feedback. As governments, it's absolutely vital that we get feedback. And we're used to it, and we should embrace it. Every 3 years, as members of the lower house, both Gay and I go back to our electorates, and the people give us their thoughts on the job we've done in the previous 3 years, and they'll, through that campaign process, tell us what we've done well and what we haven't done so well. And this is what this report does. So can I just start by saying it is welcome, and I look forward to seeing such reports every year, because holding government to account is incredibly important. But could I start by saying the first thing we need to do is look to where we were 13 months ago. And 13 months ago, there was a strategy in place, but it had no resources behind it of any real type, either financial or human resources. And in a 12-month period, we have seen a strategy put out. We've also seen $230 million put towards implementing it, and also real human resources put towards it, starting with the Prime Minister, who has taken this issue on and said, I want to be responsible for it. He's appointed a special advisor to him on this issue, Alistair McGibbon. He's appointed an ambassador, Toby Feakin, in this area. And he has said that he wants all the various arms of government to be coordinated, to be working as a team to deliver what we need to not only keep ourselves cyber secure, but also to make sure that we can take advantage of the opportunities that this area presents for the Australian economy. And if you look at what we've been able to achieve in the last 12 months since the strategy came into place, I think that the leadership which has come from the Prime Minister is there for all to see. Let's think about the task that we had to start with. In this area, it touches on, I think, about 8 or 9 different government departments or agencies that have to be collectively brought together to make sure they're being harnessed as a team to deliver. You've got the Defence Department, you've got Prime Minister and Cabinet, you've got the Foreign Affairs Department, you've got Industry and Innovation, you've got Education, you've got Attorney Generals, just to name a few. So collectively, all those departments and agencies need to be brought together, and they need to understand that, okay, as a collective team, both from the public service level and at the ministerial level, we've got to ensure that we deliver for the Australian people. Now, there's talk in other areas about how you can cooperatively or collectively bring departments or agencies together, and they're looking at doing some restructuring. One thing that's been clear in this area, in my view, is that everyone is saying, yes, this is important, yes, we have to collectively work together, and yes, the framework that has been laid out is working. Now, does that mean that we're not running into issues or problems in making sure that we're implementing the strategy as quickly and as efficiently as possible? No, it doesn't. And as Peter's said, anyway, if all we are focusing on is implementation of the strategy, the way that technology moves, the way that the climate and the ecosystem changes in this area, we will start missing things. So we have to remember that not only are we focusing on implementing the strategy, but we're also had to deal with other areas. For instance, what we saw with the US presidential election when it came to cyber influence. Now, what we were able to do was bring all the political parties together into the cabinet room not long after that occurred so that we could put cyber influence on the agenda here in Australia. This was something which was copied by the UK government some 2 months later, what we had done here in Australia. So we've also had to keep an eye on what has been occurring globally to ensure that the strategy isn't a static document, that it's a document that is going to continue to evolve. We've also said that we need to make sure where we can that we can speed up the implementation of the strategy. Now, it was a strategy which people said should be implemented over 4 years, but I think all of us in this room would agree if it takes us 4 years to implement, the landscape is going to have moved so quickly in that time that there's going to be parts of it which are completely and utterly irrelevant. So one of the things we want to make sure is that we're going to continue to adapt and change the strategy. But what are the areas that the report points to where I think there are valid areas where we need to put the focus on more and more? One of them, I think, is what we're doing around cybercrime and the impact that that's having on the community. And I think we do need to be looking at areas of how we can help, especially small businesses, families, mums and dads, individuals in this area. It's why the Prime Minister had a round table this afternoon where he had all the major telecommunications companies, all the major ISP providers in the room saying this is an area that we do need to be doing more on. This is an area that we want to focus on, and please, can you tell us your ideas of how we can do more in this area? And one of the outcomes is that we will have a special advisory group or a working group now set up which will report back to this group in 3 months' time on what are 3 or 4 simple initiatives that we need to implement in this area. Now, none of that was set out in the strategy, but as things have evolved, as we've seen what happened with WannaCry, as I've been around the nation talking to businesses, small and medium sized, and getting their feedback of how they need help and support in this area, this is what we've started doing. So can I sort of end where I began by saying that thank you to ASPI, thank you for holding the government to account, for producing this document, for your assessment. It is helpful because it helps us do our job. But it is a document that is going to continue to evolve, that we're going to have to continue to adapt to the changing climate and make sure that not only are we implementing the strategy as quickly as possible, but as the landscape changes, we're also bringing things into the strategy, bringing things into what we're doing to protect the cybersecurity landscape. And that as a government is what we're going to continue to do and drive. So thanks very much for the invitation. I look forward to the discussion a little bit later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Stan, and particularly for your kind words about ASPI and myself. I really do appreciate that. And it's all recorded, so I'll make sure we write that down for our annual report. I should also note your expectation that we'll produce another one of these next year, which I think is a good thing. So if you could please organise to let us and photograph you and Gay holding a copy of this year's version, we might use that photograph as the cover of next year's report. In the meantime, though, could you please welcome Gay to the podium?
Thanks very much, Peter, and it is a great pleasure to be here at ASPI. I feel like I'm living here at the moment. I did a media masterclass here last week, which was terrific, and It was a pilot program and it went down very well. And I always love coming to ASPI. ASPI, as Dan has rightly acknowledged, makes a significant contribution to discussion on all things strategic in Australia. It's an invaluable think tank and always producing really thought-provoking work. I mean, Thursday night we had Mark's presentation on the budget, which is, well, that man should be bottled. He is a national treasure. And so, yeah, it was a really worthwhile night. So I do feel as if I'm spending a lot of time with Peter Jennings. But that's okay. Okay, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we meet on Ngunnawal country and pay my respects to the elders past and present, and also to acknowledge Peter, but Dan, we go way back. We're in Foreign Affairs together, and all the secrets will be kept. Also, Alistair, a friend as well. It's lovely to see you here tonight. Congratulations to Fergus on the appointment in this really exciting new role. And most importantly, congratulations to the fabulous Zoe and Liam for an incredibly valuable report here. I know you've been working on it for months and months and months, and they're both bound for DFAT as Peter has outlined. I'll put it bluntly, Toby poached them. And so, yeah, but they've got exciting careers ahead of them in the international engagement space. So congratulations on this document and well done. Now, I'm going to go through a number of areas in the report that I've been pursuing since I've in this shadow role. But I just want to underscore the fact that, like so much in the national security space, cybersecurity is largely a bipartisan issue. That doesn't mean that we as an opposition won't hold the government to account on its performance in this rapidly evolving area. And I think that as people who value democracy, that's something you would want us to do. And that's why reports like this are so useful, because they test whether the government is on track with its strategy, but they also test whether we as an opposition are on track in terms of holding the government to account. Because we're all basically heading in the one direction, both the opposition and the government. As I said, it's largely bipartisan approach. We all want to ensure we create as safe and secure a cyber environment as possible for individuals, for businesses large and small, for government agencies and for critical infrastructure. So tonight I'm very conscious of time, and I'm very conscious you want to get to the Q&A session. I am just going to touch on a few areas that have been raised by the report, and Zoe and Liam know are concerns or issues that I've been pursuing. The first is government agencies. This is I am red hot on this issue, having been a bureaucrat for 10 years and also then consulting into defence. Now, the report is absolutely spot on when it comes to the assessment of the cybersecurity of government agencies. We still have a long way to go before our government agencies become what the aspiration, the exemplar for public and private sector organisations in Australia. And many of you in this room know the rap sheet. In its most recent cyber resilience report, or the follow-up review, the ANAO found that 2 out of 3 government agencies that were audited, it was a mini audit, had insufficient protections against cyber attacks from external sources. 2 of the 3 had not effectively implemented application whitelists, meaning users could install and run applications and bypass the whitelist completely. And only 1 of the 3 agencies complied with the mandated mitigation strategies, that was the 4 strategies, which has now grown to 8, and was found to be cyber resilient. And this was despite the fact that all these 3 agencies assured the Joint Committee of Public Accounts and Audit that they would achieve compliance during 2016 after the first damning audit that found that no one was really compliant in 2014. So a great deal more work needs to be done in this space, and urgently. The public has a right to know that government agencies holding personal information are secure, that they are safe. So we need greater and regular transparency on performance in government agencies, so that non-resilience of our of our government agencies is not exposed through the occasional audit. So I do believe consideration should be given to greater transparency through more regular reporting. I don't know, perhaps monthly reports to the Minister. I don't know whether Dan gets that at the moment. Bear in mind, I'm like Liam and Zoe, I'm working in a sort of an open source environment, an unclassified environment. Should we have reports on performance in annual reports? Should there be a quarterly report to the Parliament by the Minister? Should there be a carrot and stick approach? This is something that we really do need to consider when it comes to our government agencies, because having 2 out of 3 government agencies found to be cyber non-resilient at this point in time, after the Bureau of Meteorology, after the census fail, is not acceptable. Also, the report is absolutely spot on in calling for a clear roadmap with timelines, milestones and deliverables, and articulating what success looks like. The first annual update of the cybersecurity strategy showed that the past 12 months had been spent delivering plenty of actions, to use the terminology of the strategies, what I would call outputs, such as meetings and dialogues and planning sessions and scoping studies and restructures and events, but very few tangible outcomes. And I'm not in any way underestimating what's been achieved. As I said, this is a largely bipartisan approach, and we've got some catch up to do, and we are in a constantly and ever-changing, rapidly evolving environment. The fact that Alistair's been employed, the fact that Toby's finally been employed, all great outcomes, but there's still more. We need more outcomes to be achieved, and we need to have a mechanism for measuring whether we've actually achieved them. Because if we are serious about cybersecurity, we need to get serious, as this report has made the point. We need to get serious about evaluating performance, which is grounded in baseline research and against rigorous qualitative and quantitative measures. And it also, that not only helps in working out whether we've actually achieved what we wanted to achieve, but it also greatly assists in assessing whether we've done in getting a meaningful cost-benefit analysis. Because at the moment we've just got words like progress and strong progress, and they're not rigorous outcomes. As the report says, the absence of timelines leaves the government room to mask underperformance and means that that promises to accelerate or deliver initiatives ahead of schedule hold very little meaning. Now, I am conscious of time. I'm glad that Dan has touched on small business. I think that we both agree that that has been an area that's been overlooked in the first 12 months. And I know that you are focusing more on that now, and I do welcome that, and Labor has come out and welcomed that. Because the statistics are horrifying in terms of small business. It is a real weak spot. Small, and I'm thinking micro here, and small and medium. We just saw a report yesterday from the New South Wales Commissioner of Small Business where 30% of small businesses had been victims of cybercrime. That's a significant figure, 30%. And that's just in New South Wales, but I think that those sorts of stats would apply nationally, and in a way I think they're probably a bit conservative. We also found that with WannaCry, there were 12 people affected here in Australia, or 12 outfits affected here in Australia, and all those 12 were small businesses. 4 of them in the NT. I'm not going to go there. And so why is small business the target here? Well, we know why small business is the target. They are the weak spot. And so that's why we need to be focusing on small business for cyber security. There's been a lot of work done with the ASX 100s, with the health checks and the surveys and the dialogues, but we need to be spending more time with the 2.1 small businesses. And don't forget here too, 60% of those small businesses don't have any staff. They don't have any staff. They don't have a human resources department, they don't have an ICT department. They are operating around their kitchen table with their laptop on their own. I know what it's like to be doing all that, because I had my own micro business before I went into politics. Finally, I just really want to quickly touch on crisis communication. Not surprisingly, I had my own communication business, or if I went into politics. And it is, and again, it was highlighted by this report in a number of ways in terms of the need for greater behavioural change communication, but also crisis communication. It is still, it's not where it should be. Census fail rightly taught us many, many lessons, but just quickly, and I will just I'll give you a readout of WannaCry. You would have thought that we would have learnt some more lessons as a result of census fail. The review was done late last year, and yet WannaCry, when you look at, and when I read out to you what actually happened from the government agency perspective, you can see why possibly those 12 small businesses were affected, because we still don't have one clear voice speaking to individuals and small businesses. We still don't have one clear message from speaking to individuals and small businesses. So what I'll do is I'll very quickly, I'm conscious of the time, just run through the United Kingdom, the experience of the United Kingdom. 12th of May, the NCSC, which is the equivalent to our Australian Cyber Security Centre, advises it's aware of an incident and working with the NHS and UK National Cybercrime Unit. And then the CEO of NCSC makes a statement. The next day, the 13th of May, a tweet, how to prevent ransomware incident and what to do if your organisation is affected. Another tweet, finding the kill switch to stop the spread of ransomware. And then a media interview from the NCSC. Next day, updated statement on cyber attack, updated guidance for home users and small businesses, 10 steps to cyber security. Next day, advice that ransomware could hit as UK returns to work, updated statement on ransomware cyber attack. And then this goes on and on and on. Again, 10 steps to cyber security. And I'll just very quickly before I close, just give you a rundown of what actually happened in Australia. Now remember, we found out kind of overnight, it was on the Friday night, Mother's Day weekend. The overnight Friday, if you were up late, you would have heard it coming through, but it was coming through in Australia on the Saturday. So on the Friday, there's a tweet from Prime Minister and Cabinet concerned about the UK ransomware incident. You get in touch with the ACSC contact lines. And then we get the ACSC, who put out a media release on ransomware. And then, that's on the Friday night, and then on the Saturday we get a media release from another agency, from ACSC. And then on the Sunday, Mother's Day, we get a tweet from Prime Minister and Cabinet saying that Alistair was going to be on 2CC. A tweet from Alistair saying he was going to be on Radio National, 2CC and Sky News. And a retweet from Dan saying that he'd just appeared on Sky News. Also on that day, we got a retweet from Prime Minister and Cabinet on retweeting Dan's media release. And then Dan's Prime Minister and Cabinet retweeting a Dan Tehan retweet. And then Prime Minister and Cabinet retweeting that Alistair had been on Sky News. And Dan had been active on that day. He did a retweet of a range of issues, and that was fantastic. But then the next day we get ACSC, after 2 days' absence in this space, putting out a media release. And then Stay Smart Online finally got in the action by doing we're talking 3 days later, of doing a Facebook on the urgent need for, to patch and backup. And then the Minister, of course, was doing a tweet. So, as you can see, vastly different experience in Australia if you're trying to. As I said, I've been a micro business. I understand what it's like when you're on your own. You're hearing that the tsunami could potentially happen. I mean, remember in the UK, we were talking, or Europe, 200,000 organisations were affected in 100 countries. And so you hear this sort of potential tsunami, you don't know what's going on. Where do you go for the information? This is the real challenge. Where do you go? So I'll leave it there in the fact that we can perhaps have further conversation about it. We've been talking before the meeting, or before the discussion tonight, about devolution. I know that Alistair's a big fan of devolution, but should we have a devolved system so that people own this issue, but also a central system so that we actually get some sort of coordination of message and communication when it comes to a crisis, because we didn't know what we were facing with WannaCry. None of us had any idea. Well, none of us working in the unclassified open source space. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Well, Gay, thank you so much for that, and I think we oughtn't to forget the idea of more formalised reporting in departments and agencies' annual reports. I think that's something that's worth thinking about. Of course, those of us from a defence background would know the old nostrum, never retweet, you just keep advancing. Thank you very much. Plenty more where that came from, ladies and gentlemen, but not from me, because I'm now going to hand over to Fergus Hanson, who will take us through the rest of the evening. Fergus, over to you.
Very well. I just wanted to, I think in the interest of time, I'll just invite our panellists up to the stage. We have the Minister has kindly agreed and the Shadow Minister, and we also are joined by Zoe Hawkins, who is the author of this report, and Berin Lautenbach, who is the a number of different things. He is from Telstra, and Telstra is one of our main sponsors here at the International Cyber Policy Centre, and have been for a long time, so we're incredibly grateful for that relationship. But more importantly for this discussion, he is the Acting Chief Information Security Officer at Telstra and manages a large team of a few hundred people working on these exact issues that we've been talking about today, and will offer a very interesting insight, I'm sure, from the private sector. So I just ask our panellists to join the stage, and thank you very much for being here.
You want me in the middle? Easy.
Well, I might just start off with the Minister, if that's okay. Well, sorry, let me start again. Would you mind if I start with Zoe, and maybe she could provide a little bit of an overview just of the report, and just to give people a bit of a sense of what are the sort of key findings that the report has from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Minister Tehan and Gay have done a great job of touching on some of the key themes that we look at. But just to give a bit of introduction to the concept of the paper, we've been thinking a few months ago that it would be really helpful to assess the government's progress over the last 12 months against the goals it set itself in the first cybersecurity strategy. So what we looked at were the 33 initiatives and 83 associated outcomes that were part of the strategy, and undertook research and consultation with private sector entities and academia to sort of get a grasp of where are we at in that process. And it is a 4-year process, so we did take that into account, but sort of use that to formulate this narrative that we have that runs through the front of the report, and is based on the table at the back, which relates directly to the strategy's outcomes. So key findings, as has been mentioned by Minister Tehan, the new governance structure and the introduction of the leadership positions of Minister Assisting Tehan, and as well as Special Advisor Alistair McGibbon and the new Ambassador, have done a really great job of elevating the profile of cyber policy in the Australian debate. I think that is a really noticeable change in the last year, which has been fantastic. Also, the development of the public-private partnership model with the opening of the Joint Cyber Threat Sharing Centre in Brisbane, and we're looking forward to the rollout of more of those, and as well as the confirmation of the relocation of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre out of the ASIO building, just to give that bit more openness. And as well as that, the Australian Cybersecurity Growth Network has done a lot of great work this year, supporting industry development. Unfortunately, some of those great developments have also been undermined by some key issues which have also been touched on by Gay this evening. And the big one that I think is central is expectation management. And so that comes down to the communications issue we talked about before. So a lot of this great work might be being done, but maybe the lack of transparent timelines and more directed and strategic communications with the private sector and with the public has maybe left some of that a little bit unclear. And sometimes when expectations aren't managed, the speed of delivery might seem more disappointing if there isn't that strong narrative to let them know what the plan is. And off the back of that, as Gay mentioned as well, I think we saw with the census incident as well that there's that need to develop a strong crisis communication package. So there is that clear go-to message, and that helps with public confidence, which is such a big, trust and confidence online is one of the biggest ingredients to success for the digital economy. So that's one of the things that we should focus on. So, which leads me just to the top 3 recommendations that Liam and I came to through a lot of this work. Looking at measuring progress, talking about how the outcomes need to be objectively measurable. Abstract concepts are a great idea, but it's really hard to sort of say where you're going in terms of achieving them. To that note, 11 of the 83 outcomes we actually found wouldn't be quantifiably measurable, which just makes it hard to prove progress if it is being done, and making sure that it's bound by transparent timelines. Further improving the public-private partnership by more clearly delineating the division of responsibility so that companies can actually contribute to their full potential where possible by knowing exactly what is expected from them and when. I think that would definitely help. And lastly, as we've all talked about, this is a really big challenge and it does keep changing. So I think being mindful of whether the financial and human resources that we're putting behind it is keeping pace with that. Just something to keep in mind when we do these annual reviews is, do we need a little bit more behind it? That's the main findings from our report.
Wonderful. Well, I've worked in a couple of different think tanks around the world, and one, you sort of beaver away for months at a time producing these reports, and the thing that you really want to try and quantify and get a grasp on is how much influence you have and whether you have an impact on policy or not. So I just wanted to go straight to the heart of this, Minister, and ask you whether there were recommendations in this report that the government might want to take up.
Well, look, can I just touch on communication to start with? So I think it's a very important point. And what happened with WannaCry, because I think there are some lessons for us to learn out of that, but I think also we should look at the positives. And I'll just start by giving you a sense of my electorate, which is a regional and rural electorate. Now, when it comes to Twitter, the mums and dads, small business, etc., if I'm trying to communicate with them, small business, I would say there's probably, maybe 20 of them who would regularly look at their Twitter accounts. So I think judging what happened in terms of what was happening with the Twitter feed is a little bit simplistic assessment of what occurred. Just to give you a sense from from where I sat at my end. So I was in Perth when it occurred. So Alistair, I spoke with Alistair at I think it was about 5:45 a.m. Perth time. We said, okay, what's the best way we can get this message out to start with? So he went and did a media conference first thing Saturday morning as the best way using bulk media to get it out. CERT Australia were notified. They obviously used all their channels to get the necessary information out. We discussed with the need to make sure that every state government, because of what had happened with the hospitals, needed to be notified, so every state government was notified, and especially to take account of what had happened with their health systems. We asked for immediate feedback as to what the impact was being seen on the ground, and at that stage the impact was minimal. As a matter of fact, we weren't getting examples, but what I made clear was if we did get examples, then we needed to make sure that we were updating those regularly. So what we did was we started issuing on a regular basis updates on what was happening on the ground, which I've got to say, started I think with 3 businesses, might have gone to 6, then went to 12. At the same time, we asked for feedback to see whether any of the health networks were being impacted. Nothing was being impacted. So by Sunday, we did some more media. And then we did an assessment, okay, well, what's happening here? Because it's obvious we haven't been impacted like they have been in Europe, China and Russia. And then the assessment was, okay, well, maybe it's because when this hit, we were pretty much offline in Australia on Friday night. So the danger therefore is, okay, what happens when everyone comes back online on Monday morning? So once again, we geared up to get the message out for everyone when everyone was starting again, coming online on Monday morning. And one of the first things I spoke to Alistair about on the Sunday night was, would he please get in touch with his New Zealand counterparts? Because one of the lessons from Y2K and other of those examples was New Zealand gives us our best indication of what may or may not be going to happen as we switch on here. So we got regular updates from what was happening in New Zealand. Once again, impact there was minimal. We've ended up with 18, I think, businesses impacted here in Australia that we know of. There's probably some that have been unreported. But so I think on the whole, and most of the feedback we got was that communication about getting out there about what needed to be done, not in a sort of a social media sense, but in a more direct sense, was appreciated, and feedback we've had is probably did help in minimising the impact of WannaCry. But I would say this to everyone here, one of the issues that government of either colour have always found very difficult is how can you get quick messaging out into the business community and especially into the small business community. This isn't an easy challenge, and look, anyone who's got any ideas as to how you can communicate, one of the reasons we had the meeting this evening was because probably the best people to be in a position to communicate with small and medium-sized businesses is the telecommunication providers, the ISP providers, because they are basically running the infrastructure of the network which has to connect with them. So this is one of the real points of discussion that we had this evening was, okay, if something like this does occur and we do need to get the messages out, what role can they play in doing that? So that just gives you a little bit of a background onto, the processes that we went through with that. In terms of, what's in the report which is going to influence government policy? Well, I think the stuff around small business and cybercrime is something that is in the report, but can I tell you from everywhere I've been across Australia is something that I've got feedback from as well. And what the report that Gay mentioned is comes as no surprise. This is a tool now which crooks are using because it's there and because it's available. And I think you can be rest assured this has been something which has been exercised in my mind for quite some time. And you will hear more from the government on this issue. And once again, it won't be strategy bound what we're going to do. We've actually, come to the realisation that there will be stuff outside of the strategy that we need to do in this area.
Thank you. Well, government's taken a little bit of heat here, but so I might go to Berin and talk a little bit about the private sector. Should industry be taking a lead on some of these issues, and is it stepping up to the challenge, or should it be doing more? Is industry ready for this?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I listen to the. It kind of feels like we all think there's a tale of woe here. So I've been in cyber for, I'm not going to say how long, but it's more than 20 years, and it's kind of depressing. I've been in it for a very long time, and this is the first time I've actually really felt like we've got people coming together and talking to each other and trying to solve the problem. Now, are we doing everything right? No. There's things we need to improve, but that's part of the journey, right? Is try things differently. I sat in some of the conversations about the joint cybersecurity centres and looking at what are we going to do and how are we going to do it. I'm probably the most impatient person you'll ever see, so I want to make things happen, right? But at the same time, you've got so many different industries being represented in the conversations around the JCSC, and everyone is at the table looking at not what will this give me, which is where the conversation was a few years ago. How do I get things out of this to help my business? The conversation is now, there's this enlightened self-interest realisation that's happened, that we're all at the table because, do you know what? I can't secure Telstra on my own without talking to other people anymore. The problem's too big. Yeah, there's resources that come from government on intelligence, on indicators of compromise, all that kind of stuff that I can't get on my own. But if I can use them, I can not only protect myself, I can protect my customers. Yeah, and at the same time, there's things that the banks see that are useful for me, but there's things that I see that I can help banks with. So it's this enlightened self-interest thing that's starting to really bubble up, where absolutely the industry is there, ready, I think, from what I'm seeing, to help. Can we do more? I think we can. It's just working out what's the right mix between government and industry. And have we got that right yet? No, I don't think we do. But by God, we're working at it.
And can I just add to that? I mean, it's very few industries that I've come across, and I've been involved in government now for quite some time, where you see industry being so selfless in wanting to come to the table and literally give of itself to protect the greater ecosystem. And it's one of the things which has really struck me. And with that will there, it gives you great confidence that we can get it right. But we've got to remember, we were starting from scratch 13 months ago. And, just even the development of taking the Australian Cyber Security Centre out of ASD, taking it to Brindabella Park, and saying that the whole of its nature is going to change, is a significant development. And I think, at times we do have to step back and say, okay, where have we come from? Sure, we're all impatient, and I can tell you I'm as impatient as anyone in terms of making sure that, if we could have the strategy delivered in 2 years, I would have it delivered in 2 years. But you do always have to step back and say, okay, where have we come? And I must, where business and industry have come to the table and how they come to the table is quite extraordinary in this area.
It's different.
Yeah.
I might just ask Gay, if I could, you one question before we open up to the floor. We've talked about holding government to account as the opposition. If you were to come into government, would there be some recommendations that you'd like to pick up in the report, or that you'd be urging the government to take forward? Be particularly interested in the comments you made around running a small business and some of those aspects to that.
Well, I think that the small business stuff definitely. The points I highlighted today, the communication definitely, and the point that the report made too about the behavioural change. What we need to do, I think it's there's a subtext here in the fact that we need to change the way we approach cybersecurity and move it away from the technical area. We need the text there, and the report acknowledges that. But in terms of the skills development for the future, we need the technical people there, but we also need government, we need lawyers, we need philosophers, we need psychologists, we need communications people, we need people who are experts on governance and governing and public administration. We need a broad range of skills for the future, and so that was a message that was very powerful in terms of coming in on the skill set. But I think that, so the skill set message definitely, but also the behavioural change, because we really need to change the mindset in the country, and I think they're all on this mission to move from seeing this as the ICT person's responsibility to everyone's responsibility. Now, Dan says this in all his speeches. I say it in all my speeches on cybersecurity, but it's true. We need to make this business as usual. And we need people to treat it like risk, as a risk, and patching and backing up. It's just a risk mitigation strategy. Getting insurance is a risk mitigation strategy. So we need to see it as a business risk or an individual risk, and not sort of something that's a computer related to your computer and therefore very technical and scary, and I'll just go and put dinner on. So I think that definitely the behavioural change issue and seeing it as risk management. I think the small business definitely, and communication. And so I don't know whether you've got a crisis communication strategy in place yet. And I take your point, Dan, on tweeting. I'm not a big tweeter, and not I do social media every day, but I'm not a huge user. But Facebook is the tool of trade for everyone now, so that I would assume that there would have been more of a presence there, particularly on Stay Smart Online. I take the point about tweet. It is a beltway type of social media device, but for Facebook, I would have thought that there would have been more there. Because I know that I was looking at my own, the computer that I had for the business. I was actually trying to find out where to go to work out what I needed to do, to find out all the data that is on there from having the business. It's 9 years ago now, 7 years ago now, whether that was going to be compromised. So it's just, I take your point on Twitter, but so the communication, there's lots of really interesting ideas in there.
Great, thank you. I'm getting looks from staff members, political staff members about